United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I will call the meeting of the Planning Commission to order. I will introduce some of our commissioners. To my left is Sumit Shah, Fred Edwards, Paul Moore. I'm Peyton Jamison. To my right is Chris Doty and Mark Bittner, and absent is Wilson Borden. Right now, I'd like to call for any general public comment. This is any comment that is not on the agenda. Do we have any general public comment?
We do not. No.
Okay, so we will move on to approval of the action minutes for October 25th meeting.
I move we approve the minutes of the October 25th Planning Commission meeting as presented by staff.
I'll second that motion.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? Okay, we'll go on to the new items. We'll read what we read before the new items. The Planning Commission is tasked by the city's subdivision ordinance to conduct a public hearing on proposed preliminary plats that have been found to be complete by the Community Development Department. At the conclusion of the public hearing, the Planning Commission is required to review the proposed preliminary plat and provide comments and make recommendations regarding the plat to the Community Development Director. The Planning Commission does not approve or reject the proposed preliminary plat, but merely provides comments or recommendations based on the public hearing and the Planning Commission's review of the proposed preliminary plat. I will call staff to present the plat.
Good evening. The plat we're going to be talking about tonight is Crabapple Market. The applicant is New Providence LLC and Itasca Walk LLC, represented by Adam Orkin. So the site is approximately 8.8 acres, and it's located in our Crabapple form-based code, and it's zoned T4 and T5. Currently, there is existing mixed-use buildings and an undeveloped land on the site, and they're proposing to add mixed-use development and a park. So this is our site location map. It's located just behind us in downtown Crabapple, off Crabapple Road and the intersection of Heritage Walk and Itasca Walk. So this is the preliminary plat. What we're looking at here are three different tracts. We've got tract A, which is this tract here, here, and here. And then we've also got tract B and tract C. The proposed site layout is actually described in further detail in a conceptual site plan that's being reviewed by staff. But it consists of existing and proposed mixed-use buildings, and then they're also going to be proposing a park in the southwest corner of Tract B at the corner of Heritage Walk and Lacoma Trace. The park will be owned and operated by the applicant, and they are proposing some parking improvements along Lacoma Trace, which will be to remain private. So based on the submitted site plan and some supplemented information, the proposed preliminary plat meets the requirements of the applicable city codes as they pertain to the development of this property. And we're open it now for any questions for staff, and the applicant is also here, the developer and the engineer, and they would like to make some comments as well.
Okay, let's go ahead and have y'all's comments, and then we'll do a public comment. Is that okay? Have the applicant's comments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, we don't really have any comments.
Okay.
We can put up Adam Orkin, 760 Fox Hollow Run, Milton, Georgia, 300004. And we'll just put up a picture of the park that we're proposing. And basically, just a little history is we started to assemble this land probably 7-8 years ago, and over the last couple of weeks, we added another couple of tracts of land, and so the proposal is just to stay within the same form-based code, not asking for any increased density, not asking for parking, any increase or decrease in parking, and just asking y'all to look at the site plan, see what you like and see what you don't like, and adding about a 1 acre park, just shade under an acre, equivalent to what you see down in Seaside, Florida, where we get a lot of our ideas from, and concerts in the park, movies in the park, things like that, and that's about it.
Do we have public comment?
I have not received any cards unless somebody's filling them out if they'd like to speak.
Does the public have any questions in regard to this? Oh, ma'am, if you'll come up and
Fill out a card.
fill out a
and give it
card.
to me.
Okay.
Or you can fill out the card afterwards, but if you want to speak, it's the yellow card's right there, yeah.
You can come up here and speak
Yeah, you can
and
go
fill
ahead
it
and
out when
speak
you're
and
done.
then fill it out afterwards.
If you can just state your name and address.
Marie Wilkins, 12721 Lacoma Trace. And I wanted to know, can you define what mixed use means
Okay,
on the lots?
sure. We will do that.
Okay.
Any other public comment?
Yeah, the other comment is, it's mentioning 10 acres, but then it mentioned lots 5 and 6, which are not 10 acres. So we kind of see it, but we don't know exactly where that is. So if you could say, well, it's the properties behind the old blind dog, it's the properties behind this, it would make us understand it better.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
So I'll address the first, you want me to go ahead and answer
Sure.
the question? So mixed use just means that it's literally different types of uses that are within, it can be within one building or multiple buildings, whether it's office, commercial, retail, restaurant, residential. So it's not, this development is not all residential, it's not all office, it's not all one use, but it's literally mixed use. So that's the explanation of mixed use. And in regards to the site plan, we did take out a little piece of property, so it reduced it from the 10 point whatever down to 8.8, and we'd be happy to
Why don't we put
the site plan back up, yeah.
Can we put the site plan back up? And if you can use your arrow, Melissa, and show where the old blind dog is, for instance, to give people a sense of location, that would.
And Robin, can you explain, I guess, why we're here compared to 4 months ago we wouldn't be here
Right.
and combining plats?
Okay, so in the last few months, we amended our ordinance, our subdivision ordinance, where any kind of what we call preliminary plat, which is more than 3 lots that are created or continue to be subdivided, we're requiring that the applicant of that subdivision come before the Planning Commission. So it gives the opportunity for the community, as you all have received notices as well as signs are up on the property, to allow you to be able to review it, to look at what's going on. And again, as the chairman made a statement in the beginning, as well as Melissa, that this meets the ordinance requirements. It's just an opportunity for the community to see what is happening in the near future. So.
Okay, so just to clarify the layout of the tracks, originally when this was submitted, we were including this tract right here to the northern part of Tract A. That's where the 10.9 acres came in. We have since dropped that from this subdivision plat. So Tract A is just going to be this tract here. So just to orient you, Old Blind Dog is this building, I believe. So this is Crabapple Road here, so these are the existing buildings that are currently fronting Crabapple. So we're looking at this tract here, and this tract as...
Parking there to the left?
You
just wrote
right here?
down, right there.
Yeah, that's the existing parking grove that's there right now.
No, to the left.
To the left.
Yes.
That's
Yes.
Okay, so we got Tract A is these 3 pieces, and then Tract B is this piece, including Lacoma Trace, which we mentioned would be private, and then Tract C right here behind City Hall.
And would you show on that where the proposed park is going to be? So
Yeah, the park is going to be in this triangle right here in the southwest corner of Tract B. So it'll have Heritage Walk to the north and Lacoma Trace to the east. And they're proposing improvements to this road that will increase parking that will service the park.
What's on track C?
That is to be determined in the future.
Is it really 4 plats or 3 plats? We're only talking about 3, but they're technically 4.
It's one plat that is being subdivided, the land is being subdivided into 4 separate tracts, or 3 separate tracts.
And how big is track A?
So Tract A, the total of Tract A is 4.36 acres, and that includes this parcel here, this one here, and this parcel right here.
Track A will remain parking?
The parking that's there, yes.
That's what it is, please. Okay.
So is track C part of the development that you guys are working on?
Which one's track C?
Track C up at the top?
All of that.
And you don't know what that's going to be?
Well, it's going to be some type of mixed use, but I can't
On
guess
this
what
lot
it's
right
going to
here?
be.
This right here?
All this right here, can you, would it be possible to put the park picture back up that shows the courthouse?
Yeah.
Or City Hall? Is it can you can, Josh, can you zoom into just the downtown area?
Here. What, you want to do this top part here?
How's the
This one?
This one here.
All right.
So you see City Hall, the park will be across from City Hall, and the rest of the property will eventually be mixed use, similar to what we've developed so far.
What's your time frame?
It's almost like a community zoning.
Adam, do you want to go ahead and get so everybody can hear if they're watching on TV?
24, next 24 months to 10 years
On the track C?
on all of it.
So if people have questions, it'd be best if you want to come up to the speaker and ask it, and then you can go ahead and fill out the card afterwards if you want to do that. And then after all the questions are given, then we'll go through the questions.
Yeah, we're going to close public comment, and then we'll ask questions to the
Right.
applicant. So does anyone else have any questions that you'd like to address now before we close public comment?
Will track A parking lot that's gravel, is that going to be paved eventually, or will that remain gravel?
It won't, most likely it won't remain gravel, but we aren't sure what it will be. This will be very similar. If you've ever been down to 30A, you've been to Rosemary, Seaside, Watercolor, any of those areas, this will be very similar in keeping with what you have currently and that style. And if you ever want to talk to us, our office is right across the street at the right above the old Blind Dog. Just come on in.
Any other questions before we close public comment? All right.
On the area that's designated as a park, will it be a park in perpetuity?
It depends really on the city.
Hey, Ron, can you come up? If you ask a question, we really need
Yeah, we
people to
need you to
come
come
up
up
and just state your name and address, just for the record. That's all.
Ron Gilbert, 970 Trayburn Run in White Columns. So will it be in perpetuity?
I'm not going to commit to perpetuity, but I will tell you our plan is to keep the park there for a long, long time.
Okay.
I've got 2 questions.
Okay.
Go ahead.
This is name and address.
Kay Dempsey, 2131 McFarland Lane, Milton. And back on the, where it showed the track A, there were 3 separate, 3 separate parts to it. The one that's on that's far, the one that's not currently used for parking. What's the plan for that?
See which one they're referencing. Which one, track A?
It just came up, yeah.
Track A right here is currently the parking. Oh, this over here?
Yes.
It's going to be mixed use.
Okay.
Why don't you can you use the pointer?
I
Yeah,
may
the
be able
pointer
to.
will show everybody, yeah.
Yeah, right here.
And then my second question is, so the zoning's already set on all of this? So really, this is just an information session for us? We don't have any input?
Well,
Is that correct?
Here's how I would do it. If I'm sitting in y'all's shoes, what I would do is, there's not a lot of input in this session, and I'm still not quite sure the whole purpose.
This is a brand new.
But I'll let you guys work it out.
Yeah.
But what I would do is I would say, I'm going to go across the street and I'm going to meet Adam and his team at our office, and we'll walk you through the whole thing.
Okay, because, that would be my concern. I'm like, what are we here for if, other than to be told?
My understanding is, like, a lot of this stuff we already own, where the old Blind Dog is. We took the old Donnelly house, that's called the Urban Farmhouse, brought that back to life years ago. So a lot of this stuff we've owned for a while, but the new process is you have to have your parcels platted and recorded within the city, and that's this process here. And then from there, when we do have a development to go on to a parcel, we go before the design review board. And when we go before the design review board, then you can come in and you can have the public comments, and you can talk back and forth on the design of the building, the relationship of the building to the street, the uses of the building, things like that. But right now, I can't tell you any more than that. Our goal is to get the park up and operating by early summer of next year.
All right.
Adam, this, to help with the explanation, this sort of takes the place of what used to be the CZIM meeting, the Community Zoning Information Meeting, where oftentimes it was in another part of the city. It was advertised, but by bringing everybody here, we hope we create some more sense of engagement of the community. It's predictable, it's here. You don't have to figure out where the meeting's going to be. And hopefully it promotes more dialogue between the proposed development and the community that we've had in some of the past CZIM meetings that were not very well attended.
Okay.
Ma'am, do you have a question?
Yes.
Come on up.
Marie Wilkins, Lacoma Trace. And you mentioned Trace C. Was that already zone mixed, or is that a change?
Everything is zoning. We're not coming in for rezoning. We're not coming in for increase in density. We're not coming in for any variances. We're just here because this is the first step of the process.
Okay.
And when we do buildings, the same thing. We're not asking for any more than what's already in the books.
All right. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right. I will close public comment and open it up for questions from the Planning Commission to the applicant.
I have a couple. Adam, I don't know if I read it. I didn't read it in the packet because I don't think that's where I saw it. But at one point, I think in the advertisement of it, when some of this has been socialized to the community via social media and et cetera, and maybe it even been in the paper, or maybe been actually from the city itself. Did I read, is this a correct statement, that the architecture that's intended for the buildings is going to be in keeping with the Old Blind Dog and the other buildings that are currently existing?
Yeah, everything that we've done so far.
So pretty precisely the same, or just in concept, or broad brushstroke the same? And I think there's a nice...
I wouldn't say, all right, so I look at it this way. I look at it that you have areas like Dunwoody, and I would never propose to do what Dunwoody did because Dunwoody, they're going back and renovating Dunwoody because everything looks the same.
Right.
So if you step back, I spent a lot of time down in Seaside. I spent a lot of time with a gentleman named Andreas Dewani, who was the land planner and town architect of Alice Beach, Rosemary Beach, Seaside, Vickery up here. I think he did some work in Woodstock, did some work in Roswell. And so what Andreas does is it's more of an eclectic use of architecture, but it's got a common theme that takes you all the way through it. So in this area, I would say it would stay an eclectic look, but working with Bob Buscemi and the other planners here in the city, it's going to be a very, very nice look.
Good. And the reason I asked the question is I think that we've set a good core standard with the architecture that's currently being, that we're enjoying today. I think we actually have a couple of different looks in the fact that one of the first buildings that went up, I think it may have been one of yours actually, it was, or maybe not one of yours originally, where the dentist offices
Yeah, we
museum.
bought that. That was already built.
Yeah. So there's obviously a little bit of a variation there. I think about my own experience in Woodstock, and it has a pretty good mix of look and feel there.
Yeah.
But so having said that, I know that our own code is pretty tight on some stuff too. So I want to make sure that we take a look at, we want to keep with adherence to our code, but also make sure that we enjoy the opportunity that may be there to introduce a bit of a variation so it's not like a Dunwoody.
Yeah, and I would say that our code does allow for that type of architectural flexibility.
Okay, good, thank you. That was the first path I wanted to go down. The second is also in keeping with some description or some discussion about the park. The presentation that's been shared with us this evening actually shows a structure in that. Are you thinking about development of anything of that kind in the park, or is it just intended to be green space?
Well, two things Andreas taught me years ago was a development like this, a traditional neighborhood development needs two things along with all the uses. It needs a corner store, and we're bringing a corner store similar to Motica Market, and it needs green space. And his advice is always keep the green space simple. So this green space is very simple. It's got a plaza area. We'll be before the design review board next week to present it, but it's got a plaza area that you can sit underneath shade trees, read a book, just relax, and then the rest is just all green space, throw a Frisbee, enjoy a picnic, throw a football, walk your dog, and then there will be a stage set up, built to the standards for the local high schools to use for theater, concerts in the park, movies in the park. You'll be able to have farmers markets in the park. So the only structure would just be a stage.
So stage is meaning a raised platform or raised something with a backing to it?
I think it's well, down in Seaside, they use just a raised stage, just a raised platform. And then for concerts or anything that they need something to... A backdrop, they bring these tents in and do that. They set up the tents, or if they have the Philharmonic or an orchestra, they'll do a little bit different setting up there.
Okay, yeah, there's a lot of temporary solutions that for acoustics that can
there are.
Don't have to be permanent. I would just propose I'd love to see something like that, but I also would encourage it not necessarily being a permanent structure where you have the flexibility to keep the benefit of the green space.
Yeah.
And when you mentioned plaza, is that implying hardscape for that? So it's a hardscape area?
So it's going to be a hardscape material, a mix of concrete bands, stone inlaid, and maybe 20 to 25 feet wide, trees running down both sides of it.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Last of my questions for the moment is the purpose behind keeping the dividing road private. Can you talk about that for a minute?
Other than we bought it, it's a private road. We aren't quite sure until the development's finished what to do with it.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions? All right.
I have a question. What was the reason why it was reduced from 10.9 to 8.8?
Your process, we're supposed to put together all the assets we own, all the land holdings we own, and the acre and a half or so discrepancy is owned by a different property owner. So we pulled his site out. So our ownership is the smaller number.
So following up on that, does that imply at the moment that they're not working in concert with you on this, or?
No, they are. I mean, it's a local developer, Will Stoles. Will does great stuff, and he's doing his thing. And I think the process is when he comes in to record his, he'll do exactly what we're doing, but just show his acre and a half.
Okay.
Anything else?
And so, like with the park, and I guess potentially having concerts and all those things. I mean, would all those meet any ordinance requirements?
They would, whatever y'all's ordinances say, that's what will happen there.
Okay. So, music can't go, whatever. Loud noise past whatever time, especially if there's going to be residential around this area.
Absolutely.
that would be followed, right?
Yeah. The beauty of the park, though, the beauty of the park is to bring people together.
Sure.
And when it's built, I bet you'll have more phone calls. We'll stay by the ordinance, but you'll have more phone calls to have the music last longer than you'll have phone calls to turn it off.
Hey, one more question.
Okay.
It has to do with the parking enhancements you're talking about next to the park. Can you describe that in a little bit more detail?
Well, we'll present it next week, but we're going to add just a row of parking on both sides of, is that Lacoma?
I think it's
On both sides of Lacoma. So that adds about 45 spaces, and it gives back about 30 spaces that the city took away from us.
Okay.
And I think you were mentioning during the public comment, this is going to be about 2 years, you said, for all of it to be developed. Is that right?
No, I think it's going to start in spring of this year with the park. And if you ask me, I'd say a total build out is probably about 5 to 10 years. 10 years being, yeah.
Okay. So,
And we'll own this long term, so we'll be here for a long time.
but in terms of, I guess, kind of your concept plan, that, what do you think in a time frame for when that may come about? And kind of your whole plan of what's going to be in these tracks?
Well, we already have that.
I mean, you know exactly what the mixed use is.
No, we know, we know architectural styles, things we like, things we don't like. We don't know the exact uses, the mixes. There'll be a residential component, there'll be office component, there'll be a restaurant cafe component, there will be retail shops component, but as far as what percentage is what the market will bear.
Sorry. You talked about the introduction of the market as one of the core tenets to making something like this work. Green space plus a corner store. So in keeping with Samit's question as well. So are there any core tenants that are hard identified at this point, or is it still all moving targets?
It's all moving targets. What we would love to have, though, is we're looking strongly for a yoga Pilates studio.
Okay.
Any other questions? All right, well, there's not a formal vote at this hearing, so I guess I would recommend to all the citizens to come to the DRB meeting. When is that? The Design Review Board?
Next Tuesday evening.
Next Tuesday, that's when you'll see some architectural stuff, and it's a little more in-depth and a little more formal at that hearing. So that's next Tuesday. So thank you.
Thank you.
Next Tuesday here, yep. And Robin, I need my long speech for the next items.
You don't have that memorized?
Oh,
I went trick-or-treating in your neighborhood. Saw your wife.
That's right.
She
That's
says,
right.
She says you're in Hawaii.
I
I'm like,
forgot about that.
what? I'm
Yeah.
like, Chris is in Hawaii?
Oh my God, Waikiki was a crazy. You know that like main drive that runs along through there. You couldn't walk. I mean, it was shoulder to shoulder with people.
He's in Hawaii. I went trick-or-treating in his neighborhood.
For it was an Air Force summit that we went to up there. Yeah, she said, you know, she hears this like clackety wagon coming down this
Me, Joe, and Lauren.
and I'm like, what the hell? And she's like, yeah, I totally forgot about that. That's too funny.
Yeah. Tell Robin to bring my stuff. I know, so I'm leaving back. I need to talk to you. I just feel sorry for the people. I know, because it's like, that's,
Versus
and so
Pilates.
the class process works when you have, yeah, or like, it's like, you know, I'm going to develop 20 hours. you're like, when this is
Oh, I broke my shoulder.
it's full. So we need to
Kathy. Everyone says that. You're not the first.
I'm an old lady now.
Hey. Hi, how are you? I'm doing well. What do you, oh, I fell off my bicycle and broke my shoulder.
Just towards the end of it now?
But I just happened last week. Day before Thanksgiving.
Did you get you out of cooking?
Well, luckily I wasn't cooking. I really was stressed out on that one. That's good.
Well, it's so nice to see you.
Yes, nice to see you.
Take care.
we turn in?
Feel
Where do
better.
we
Oh, yes, let me have that.
Yeah, I didn't write down the
This is
question.
blank.
Yeah, I'll put this one.
Okay.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and move on to our next agenda items.
If he, anyway,
If we'll
from what I understand, he's not going to do it.
we're gonna go ahead and get started. If you can
But I'd like,
step out of the room, please.
yeah, but but it's all zoned.
I'm not even on. Hey, Robin, am I on?
Yeah, you just have to be left.
But he'll go before the.
All right, everybody, we're going to get started for our next agenda items. So this is a more formal. This is a more formal reading I have to read for our next item since they're text amendments. I'll read the whole thing. This is a regular meeting of the City of Milton Planning Commission. I'm Peyton Jamison, Chairman. This is a 7-member commission appointed by the City of Milton Mayor and City Council, created for the purpose of holding public hearings and making recommendations on rezoning, use permits, concurrent variance applications, comprehensive land use plan and plan map, and other related plans, and amendments to the zoning ordinance. I've already introduced our board members. The petitions will be heard in the sequence listed on the posted agenda. I would like to acquaint you with some of the rules and procedures conducting this meeting. The applicant and all those speaking in support of an application will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present the petition. The applicant may choose to save some of the time for rebuttal following the presentation by the opposition. The opposition will be allowed a total of 10 minutes to present its position. If time remains, the opposition will be allowed to rebut. Since the burden of proof is upon the applicant will be allowed to make closing remarks provided time remains with the allotted time. The staff of the Community Development Department will be keeping track of time and will inform you periodically of the remaining time for your presentation. Each speaker must fill out a speaker card before speaking and leave it with the staff member of the Community Development Department. All speakers will identify themselves by name, address, and organization, if applicable, before beginning their presentation. When an opponent of a rezoning action has made within 2 years immediately preceding the filing of the rezoning action being opposed, campaign contributions aggregating $250 or more to a local government official of the local government which will consider the application, it shall be the duty of the opponent to file a disclosure with the governing authority of the respective local government at least 5 days prior to the Planning Commission meeting. A violation of the relevant state statute constitutes a misdemeanor. Therefore, if you have contributed $250 or more to a council member and you have not filed a disclosure prior to the Planning Commission meeting, the city attorney strongly suggests that you have someone else speak for your point of view. Each application has been properly filed with the Department of Community Development. Signs have been posted on each site. The matter has been advertised, and the notices have been mailed to property owners affected by this zoning as required by the Milton Zoning Ordinance. The Planning Commission's recommendation will be forwarded to the City of Milton Mayor and City Council for final disposition. The Mayor and City Council hearing will be held approximately 3.5 weeks from this hearing on the third Monday of each month at 6 p.m. in the council chambers. The Community Development Department has reviewed each application in conjunction with various agencies and departments, both internal and external to the city. Staff's recommendations, findings, and conclusions are here before us in written form, which has been made available to all petitioners and to the public. Demonstration of any sort within the chamber is prohibited, so please refrain from any applause, dialogue with the person speaking, or outbursts. Please turn off all cell phones or place them on silent. All remarks will be addressed by the Planning Commission. Please show the same respect to the person speaking that you will expect to receive yourself. In addition, the applicant shall not submit material to the Planning Commission during the meeting unless requested to do so by the Commission. All material that you wish to be reviewed by the Commission in consideration of your application should be submitted to the staff of the Community Development Department to be included in the normal distribution of packages to the Commission. Finally, to the applicant, if your petition is deferred in accordance with the Milton Zoning Ordinance, you are required to update or obtain a new sign for reposting. Failure to update or repost will result in further delay. There are no exceptions. Okay? I guess Robin bailed.
Yeah,
All right.
I'll take over.
Okay.
We have 3 text amendments for your review and consideration this evening. I would like to, with your concurrence, talk to both the first 2, because they essentially consist of the same change. And specifically, they are RZ 17-09, which is a text amendment to Article 9 for the Crabapple Form-Based Code, Section 4.9 and 4.10, as it relates to parking. And then additionally, RZ 17-10, a text amendment to Article 10 of the Deerfield Form-Based Code, Section 4.9 and 4.10, as it relates to parking. So I will come up. And let me just set the context, if I may. Well, good evening, Chairman and members of the Planning Commission. The context for this proposed change is that, as you know, we have form-based codes both in Deerfield and Crabapple. And the form-based code really does not address the use per se. It talks about the form, and we control well, let me back up. It does address the use, but first we look at the form and the setback and the height and the density, and then we have a set of allowed uses that fit into that form. We do not do that with parking. When we wrote the form-based codes for both Deerfield and Crabapple, we cited the existing parking ordinance. And the existing parking ordinance relates to specific uses. So it relates to an office use. There's a specific requirement for parking. Residential has a different requirement. Restaurants has an even more different requirement, and on and on. And so we felt that we were being very inconsistent, and it was very hard to administer because whenever there was a change in a use, you'd have to run back and recalculate all of the parking requirements and hope that it all worked and find a way to make it work if possible, and if not, then look to alternative uses with lower requirements. So we looked at other form-based codes to see how this was handled in other places. And we came up with something that we thought would be a lot easier for us in terms of dealing with site plans and current and future uses of different businesses located or residences located within a specific building. And that is to change the code from relating it to a use to a requirement of 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet of building, regardless of the use. And that, you know, that would be a little higher if it was an office use. It would be a little higher than retail, but a little lower than restaurant. And we felt that it would balance out. But in addition, there would be a requirement for 2 parking spaces for a residential unit and 1 parking space for a hotel, motel, bed and breakfast. So with those 2 exceptions, everything else would be at a requirement of 3.5 per 1,000. So with that, let me just review my little presentation with you, and then we can discuss it if you'd like. Staff is recommending to change the required parking from use-based requirements, such as retail, office, restaurant, or residential, integrated with mixed uses, to an average requirement of 3.5 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Excuse me. This will allow for a better design for the form-based code developments and eliminate overparking, which we experience with our current parking requirements. Pardon me, I'm very sorry. The exceptions to this requirement, as I mentioned, are single-family uses, which still need to provide 2 parking spaces per unit, and lodging units, which include hotels, motels, and bed and breakfasts, will require 1 parking space per room. The proposed amendment also permits the Community Development Director to grant a 10% overall reduction of parking by warrant. Additionally, this recommended change will reduce the amount of impervious surfaces and allows for shared parking whereby spaces can be allocated based on use and time of day. So for the several reasons, we are recommending the change to our parking ordinance to this new formula, if you may.
Okay. Just reading through it. We have public comment for this?
I don't have any yellow.
Okay. All right. We'll close public comment and have questions for staff.
I just have a couple. I was given a call in regards to, I guess, their misunderstanding maybe of the reduction in at the last part of it, of the first one. Granted 10% overall reduction in parking by warrant. They didn't understand, is somebody, is there a warrant office out here somewhere? Somebody that's going to...
Yes, that would be me.
And I know that. Okay.
Yes,
But I think
yes. And let me just explain that process, is that there are allowed changes to our code by warrant, but for the parking specifically, we limit it to 10%. But it would have to be a warrant. I would have to do it on a case-by-case basis and determine that there was sufficient parking, that we weren't over parking, which sometimes happens, and that the 10% reduction would be allowed.
Okay. That's the only one I have on that.
Kathy, when I think about some of the meetings I participated in, and in particular the crabapple, what is it called, placemaking?
Yes.
Series of meetings we participated in. We never talked about being over-parked in those meetings. It was typically a discussion about how under-spaced we were, and some of the challenges that the current placemaking plan was having to address, with parking in particular being one of the biggest issues. If my takeaway on this is that this potentially would give the flexibility to reduce parking in Crabapple, at least on the surface it appears to be that to me, and that seems inconsistent with what one of the underlying issues has been in terms of the outcry from the community about Crabapple in particular.
Well, a couple of comments. First of all, when we did the placemaking plan, we did find that there was something like almost close to 1,000 spaces that were underutilized within the area. That, during the evening, for instance, there were a lot of, whether it was a daycare center or a church or something, there was a tremendous amount of area that was underutilized that could be utilized for parking. Using the 3.5, we thought was a good average, and talking to other mixed-use developments in the metro area, that is a number that has been very useful and usable in terms of coming up with something that, for an overall number. And then lastly, I have to put my pitch in because I'm a firm believer in this, and as the planner in the room, the autonomous vehicle is coming. And, we're already using the Uber and the Lyft. And our placemaking plan did talk about valet areas, if you remember, where you could pick up and drop off. Yep. And the whole idea of putting a lot of money into future parking decks and whatnot, I'm not sure that we need to worry about that in the future. And I think the land use is going to be changing significantly because our habits are going to change based on the AVs that are coming a lot sooner than anyone ever really thought. So I think that we have to be practical. We don't want to create a parking shortage, but we don't want to overpark, and we're seeing a lot of overparking going on. So we wanted to be fair and come up with something that we thought was workable, and that's how we came to this number.
That prompts a couple more questions for me. One is, can you give me some examples of areas that you did assess that produced that average?
I had our planning technician look at, there were several mixed-use areas, some in the Atlanta area. We looked at Woodstock. We looked around at a lot of the communities in the area to find out what was a good number. And I would have to get back to you if you wanted all the specific lists that he gave me, but he did do an extensive analysis.
Like Woodstock in particular, how this would compare to theirs?
I couldn't tell you. There was a whole series of an analysis that we did, and then talking to...
You guys take this stuff seriously, so I'm not challenging the fact that it was thoroughly researched.
And I talked to a lot of consultants as well, and planners, So I really did as best a survey as I could because I didn't want to park this area. I didn't want to overpark it. So that's why I came up with 3.5. I could have gone to 3 or 4, and I thought 3.5 was really the place that we needed to be.
Okay. I don't disagree with you about the autonomous vehicle as part of our future. I'm not sure we're there yet, but especially in what is more of a rural community than more urban area, where I think that there are reasons to still think about maybe Milton being probably a slower adopter to that than some of the more metro areas. But I'm concerned that I haven't necessarily addressed the things that were the concerns, at least not that I've had a chance to review either in the deck or via conversation so far, to arrest my personal concerns about that when it was such a significant portion of the discussion in the place-making plan. I'll just leave that as a statement rather than a question. I would also pose this question, though. The fact that we're addressing Crabapple and Deerfield together, I think that they're two rather remarkably different areas in terms of the potential for high-rise in Deerfield compared to here. It's not necessarily intended to be a retail area in Deerfield, so it's a very different kind of use than by day than by night, where in the development of Crabapple being a mixed use, I don't know that I'm prepared to blend the two with that average. Is there a reason that we're choosing to combine rather than still address them for parking concerns, but still address the anomalies that make them quite different?
Well, I think that we're seeing, especially in the Deerfield area, a lot of this retail that is very much overparked. We had just a recent example of a restaurant that went into a shopping center that had a major supermarket in it, and of which a third of the lot was never really used, and he wanted to put an outdoor seating area, which counts toward your square footage. And there wasn't enough parking on the shopping area to do it. And it just made no sense. And so I think there are still a lot of examples. Now, clearly, if a new development is going in and they're going to market it, the marketplace, as Peyton can tell you, will bear, the parking needs have to be addressed by the developer as well as the renter, because otherwise the space isn't going to get rented. So the marketplace plays a role in that too. So I don't want to obviate that role. But I think that we just have to be practical in terms of what we're doing and come up with something so that we don't create this overparking, this tremendous sea of impervious surface that we're seeing, where I think we're really going the other way. And I just thought we needed to get ahead of it a little.
Okay. I would just add one more thought to that, and again, just personal experience to this. We're Crabapple's just getting its footing here. Right. We've seen a couple things come before us that, like the last meeting we had, the 66 homestead presentation to us on the 16 acres. Obviously, lots of parking going to come with that because of the kind of use it was. It's going to change traffic patterns, et cetera. You look at the kind of use that happens here in the evening several times a week. If you just look at the biking community that's chosen to make this their trailhead, or as they're embarking into the community for their workouts, that's a lot of parking demand. I think that is not going to go away anytime soon. You start introducing some of these, developments. I'm concerned that this still, to make my point from earlier, underparks us for what the immediate demands are. If you look at, I know that even though Adam spoke to like one of his development plans is still going to be 5 to 10 years in terms of the big picture, but the area today that's used by the biking community alone, I think, fills up the parking lots that are there now. So I'm not sure that I'm not convinced yet that this addresses it. We may be ahead of ourselves in looking at reducing rather than keeping what we've got.
Can I make a...
And keeping them, and addressing them together.
I think, Kathy, that's why the question came to me about the warrant, was the fact that they're very, very concerned about the fact that we had had meetings talking about this parking situation here in Crabapple, and then all at once they see that we're going to have a 10% reduction.
Well, that's
And
only on a
why
case-by-case.
That's why they did it
Yes.
by saying, what is meant by the word warrant.
Right, sure.
But there was great concern about that reduction.
I go to Crabapple from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. for the last, 8 years, and I've always had a parking spot except for St. Patrick's Day and Crabapple Fest. So,
Yeah, but that's about any of the same stuff here.
correct. So I guess my question to Kathy is, what's the current average? So let's say you want to do the same development here in Crabapple. What's the current per 1,000 feet?
Well, let me give our zoning expert, if you can
So
enumerate that.
before I answer that question, I want to address your question about Deerfield. And you had the idea that we think about Deerfield being primarily office. So the 3.5 overall, right now, an office, a regular office is 2.8 per 1,000. A medical office is 4 per 1,000 because obviously they have a lot of traffic. So I think the concern about the office part, I think the 3.5 is a good average. I don't think you're going to be underparked for that type, even for a building, for a 5-story office building. I think you're going to be fine. So that's just addressing, because your concern was with office. So
I think about Deerfield, it's a very different kind of application to both short-term and long-term in terms of the vision of the city. You would probably be more likely to contemplate a parking deck, if appropriate, based on the developments that come before us over there than you would here.
Right.
You also have probably greater opportunity to go down, underground there than you would here with some of the kinds of developments. Think about the Verizon complex.
But they still need to meet the parking ratios.
But they'd be using decks.
Yeah. So anyway, that was just a comment for that. But in regards to here in Crabapple, the largest parking hog is a restaurant, which is 10 spaces per 1,000. Office, like I mentioned, is 2.8. Retail is 4. Medical office is 4. So we do have a calculation that allows us to do what we call shared parking. So it's a calculation that takes into consideration the different square footages of different uses and the time that it's being used. Right. So it's a very complicated thing that it takes me a long time to do my elementary math of multiplication and division and stuff. So there is a process to try to reduce the parking. It typically is around 20%. Overall, I think is a good target that shared parking does. So that's what we have in hand now. And I would say that like I said, the restaurants are the biggest producer of parking requirements. But overall, I think that the 3.5 works, and that's the research that we've done with other jurisdictions and other resources. So
it sounds like, but is some of this, like, which uses are kind of, causing you to potentially want to try to change this, and, causing the overparking?
Well, it's just that rather than driving the parking ratios based on square footage of a certain use, which is every time a new use moves in, we have to go out and calculate the parking to see if it's going to fit. So that there's a difference between an office and a retail, or a retail and a restaurant. And so we're always recalculating everything, and then we're doing a shared parking analysis as well. This way, it's a lot cleaner. Everyone understands when the developer comes in, for instance, he understands that he needs, for every 1,000 square feet of building that he builds, he needs to provide 3.5. And from our perspective, regardless of what the tenant is in the building, it's a 3.5 per 1,000 ratio.
So let's play that out, Kathy. Let's say right now, as we heard in the presentation earlier this evening, there's some conceptual things that we would like to see as a part of it. whether it's a market, whether it's a restaurant, whether it's a Pilates, et cetera. Great in terms of conceptualizing what it will look like. It doesn't necessarily, and that implies a certain parking use with each one of those. Say that's pretty calculatable, if that's the right word. What it doesn't imply, or what it doesn't capture, is what if future use says by trend, this is one of the hottest restaurant areas in town, and you think about, if this becomes the coolest place to see and be seen, and it's got the best food in town, all of a sudden, if we contemplated Pilates in a market and dog grooming and something else, and it's restaurant, we've got a problem, right?
Well,
That'd be a good problem.
Well, it's a good problem from
it's
the
a good
standpoint of
problem,
the kind
and-
of things we'd like to see here, but it's a bad problem in terms of how do you park.
Well,
I'll
be honest. Like downtown Roswell was a bunch of art places, just galleries, plain and simple. One restaurant came in, the next one came in, and all of a sudden it blew up. And they had a major parking problem, but it kind of worked itself out, I think, with the invention of Uber, because I say half the people that go to downtown Roswell or go to Avalon are using Uber now. Now, if I would love it if downtown Roswell was like Crabapple in the future. But you bring up a good point, and I'll give a great example is when my wife had the business over across the street. This is when the times were tough. And it was only, it was only spaced out to have 2 restaurants. That was when Fulton County approved it. It was 2 restaurants. And then all of a sudden, when times got tough, they ended up adding 2 other restaurants to 4. And that parking was terrible.
It was parking
when the restaurants were brand new and open and everyone was there, and then after it was all hot, then you move on. But so I can see how, if you just have an average space instead of 10 here, 4 for this, and then the economy goes down, a business goes out, we need to find someone else, it can be a little tricky. But do I know if 3.5 is the perfect number? I don't know that.
Won't the parking spots, in a sense, there's going to be so many spots, won't that dictate what can be put in? If you don't have enough spots, you can't put in 2 or 3 more restaurants.
Correct.
So the spots are going to dictate what goes in.
Once the development used to, think about it.
Correct.
Well, it still has to. They're not. If they're going to come in for a business license, and a restaurant can't, and it's a 10,000 square foot restaurant that needs, do the math on it, 35. So and they can't provide it, they can't get a license.
And they're not going to
right?
sign. They're not going to sign a lease if they're not.
Yeah.
gonna
So
park.
I think it's going to be dictated by.
You're right.
The businesses that go in are going to be dictated. So I think there's going to be a check and balance here.
Correct.
Right now, we have the luxury of saying clean slate. Whatever comes has the opportunity to take advantage of what's being proposed, and until it's completed, there's all this flexibility. Once it's done, you're not going to.
They're going to lose their
Say,
flexibility.
hey, we need to add 4 more parking spots. We got to take the building down, or vice versa. We can't. So I think all of a sudden you're kind of trapped with what you've got. Not trapped, but you have what you have at the end of the day. And to your point, Mark, if a restaurant comes in and says, gee, I really love that corner spot, but it's surrounded by some other restaurants, parking's going to be a nightmare. I think I'll move along to a different development, and that restaurant goes to a different location.
So I
Why
think
is that bad?
it's not.
I know.
I hear you.
It's not bad.
And we also have the option for valet parking, which a lot of restaurants do too. If you go to Midtown, this is all you do. So I think the solutions are out there, and I think that I just wanted to present something a little more practical from everyone's perspective that can be used as we administer this code.
No, I can see it being extremely difficult if someone's coming in with a mixed-use building and you really don't know what the uses are until people start signing leases. I can see that being pretty difficult. So, yeah, I understand.
But we want to be responsible, and
Right.
we don't want to underpark. Paul's
Right.
comment is clear. And we agree with that. But by the same token, what's the balance? And by looking at other communities, we try, and talking to other professionals, this is the balance we came up with. So
Kathy, what was the true spark? What was the driving force behind this coming forward at this point in time?
Me. I looked at our code and said that this is getting ridiculous as we start to develop all this area, and we're looking at a code that is based on use, which we don't use to generate. We're looking at space. So I wanted to equate something more to space than to use.
But it's okay, and please take this the right way.
Yes.
But you participated in the same meetings that I did with the placemakers, and you heard the same concern from the community. And the way that that parking discussion was prompted was on theoretical, hypothetical presentation by the consultants with likely uses based on things that the community had expressed they wanted to see, likely things based on trends that are coming to the areas, popular, uses. So there was methodology behind their presentation about the requirement for the parking. And the takeaway, the conclusion was we are grossly underprepared for what that was. And then here we are, not a year later, saying we're overparked.
Well, I think that there's a tremendous amount of underutilized parking spaces, which was I identify there. And one of the things they came up with was the pick-off and drop-off, which I thought was, again, to try and eliminate the tremendous amount of pervious surface that we have. I think there are other strategies, and I talked to them a lot and reviewed, actually, this number with them as well, in that, what is a reasonable number that gives everyone guidance in terms of what we're looking for parking spaces. And I do think that if we had the proliferation of restaurants, and I was in Roswell when the mayor of Roswell said we won't have a parking requirement for the restaurants on Canton Street. So we ran with that. And yes, it took a couple of years, but it did get backed up in terms of parking. But I think we have to be responsible in terms of requiring some parking, but what is that number? And I just feel that we get to the point where we're just requiring too much parking.
So let me ask this question. So is there, right now with the way it is there the ability now to do this warrant and be able to reduce the parking?
I can reduce 10% based on the old way of calculating, which is by use. So,
But can I throw it in?
Oh, sure.
That it really isn't a reduction. What that currently, how the code reads, she can reduce it 10%, but the property owner or the developer has to show that it's on the site for future development if it's needed.
Yes, that's right.
So you really still have it on the site, but you don't have to actually construct it as parking spots. So that kind of limits the amount of development. So it really isn't a reduction. It's just, okay, well, if we really, really need it, we'll develop it in the future. But we have to show that we have space for it.
Yeah, so
it's a little different.
It would show up as a landscape strip, for instance, okay?
So then same thing now, if you go with this way of doing it, and let's just say you even gave them a reduction, but let's just say, and at that point now, they didn't have any space that they could build upon in the future, and now in the future, there is a shortage, then what? What are you supposed to do at that point? Same scenario, right?
Right, exactly. But as I mentioned, it's a case-by-case basis, and they would have to prove to me that they had a tremendous amount of parking already there, that it wasn't going to be a problem in the future, and it would be something that I would not do
like it could be an
regularly.
office complex or something that
right, where there was a tremendous amount of parking already there. But,
But still,
that's
it'd be case-by-case basis,
Yes.
right?
That's
so
correct.
If we kept it the way it is, you could still do it on a case-by-case basis. And if you felt, as a planner, hey, this is going to be too much parking, we don't need this much parking, you can go ahead and do the reduction now. But again, it can be a case-by-case basis. I mean, you could still do it case-by-case, because it seems like if you were to change it, it's going to be case-by-case again.
Yes, that's the intent.
Or if you keep it the same way, you could do case-by-case, but you could also potentially think of alternative ways or alternative suggestions on how you can alleviate a potential parking issue if it's the same way. Right?
If we keep it the way it is now, yes.
So this is pure hypothetical, and it's going to be grotesque numbers for the sake of making my point. if today the requirement based on a 50% development of a 10-acre plat, parcel, is for structure, regardless of its use, and the other 50% is intended for parking. If this were to then be reduced to 25% used for parking, what happens to the other 25%? Is it then become potential for development? It doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get green space out of it, right? If we don't carry this to the next step, what happens if we do reduce the parking? What happens to the now available?
Well, there's development limitations on every acre, in terms of how much square footage.
Form-based code.
Right, that you can do. And then there are requirements for landscaping and for trees and the parking lot and whatnot. So they'd have to come in with a site plan meeting our code. And the parking is just one more regulation, if you will, that they would have to meet for that site plan to be reviewed and approved by us.
But so if we reduce the parking requirement, that means that reduction is available for something else. We're talking about, we're implying it's going to reduce the impervious surface, but not necessarily.
Well, you're assuming every case is going to be a reduction. Like she said, some it's more than the current code requires, and some it's less. And we seem to have taken a blanket that it's going to be less. We don't know that. We don't know what uses are going in any of these places. I mean, even the developers don't even know what they're going to build.
Right. Yeah, but my concern is the less that's available is not in keeping with what's been presented to us as part of the placemaking, where parking was a huge issue.
Well, I will say that our codes are fairly strict in terms of design and layout and landscaping and trees and whatnot. So our city architect would review all plans, and they would have to pass muster and that it met the intent of the crabapple form-based code. But again, it's a case by case, so I can't speak generally, but that's,
like I said,
that's as best as I can tell you.
I think the more commercial development we have in crabapple, the better. I guess my question is, well, at the end of the day, the landlord is going to take the responsibility, because if for some reason something happens and we're severely underparked, well, people aren't going to be signing leases, and it's going to hurt their bottom line. So I mean,
the market will take.
Yeah, the market will kind of take care of that. But I understand. I don't want to end up where like a Kohl's or a Target, where let's just say that. Look at all those parking spaces. That's a complete waste. It's a complete waste. So I mean, I kind of understand where you're coming from, and the 3.5 number. Like I said, I don't know what the right number is. I'm kind of trusting y'all's analytical stuff and research that y'all did, and I don't know if Woodstock's underparked or not, but they got a great downtown. If that's where you used it from, so I don't know. It's kind of where I am.
I mean, touching on that, do you recall if any of the other, did you guys analyze any of the other surrounding North Fulton cities, like Alpharetta, Roswell?
Robin, do you remember?
Similar to what you guys are proposing?
It's been so long since we did this. It's been a couple months. I just don't remember offhand.
I mean, I do know that I think Alpharetta was going to basically zero. Downtown Alpharetta they're not making any requirements for parking. And I don't want to tell you something that's inaccurate, but I'd be happy to get you the information.
We can certainly provide that breakdown for you of
I think that might be good just for when does it go to council? It
would be the 18th. It's a first read for next Monday.
Okay.
Unless you defer.
No, I just think that would probably be
for the council.
I think that would be good. That's all.
So it won't be. It'll go to a work session on the 11th. So that'll be kind of our discussion we'll have with the council on the 11th, and then if it goes for a vote on the 18th.
Okay. Let's make one more point. I think we're also, if I remember correct, Kathy, reducing the requirement for the residential area as well. It's now going to be 2 is the requirement for residential.
So it's a reduction.
What it's always been is 2.
I thought it was reduction
No,
No.
no, no, no. We left that at 2, and we left the hotels at 1.
Okay, I misunderstood that. 'Cause one of the things I don't want to see is because we're encouraging residential to be blended here, we've got some single-family as well as some multifamily proposed, that we end up pushing the parking into what would have been a residential area, and all of a sudden you've got residents that are underparked, or just,
No matter what, we're going to preserve there. I mean, even if you did a stack flat and mixed use, I mean, everybody wants 2 parking spaces. So even if it was a mixed use residential, we're always going to require the 2. And then on top of that, whatever the rest of the square footage is.
Yeah, well, I think about, the presentation was made to us at the last meeting. Not only did they present the residential parking requirements, but there was a blended parking presentation of the area around the lake, where there was opportunity for overflow for whether it was, guests coming to the homes or whether it was use of the park. There was going to be flex space available there too, where you weren't suddenly out of parking spaces when you're trying to come home. You're a 4-car family, young family with young drivers. All of a sudden, that 2 is 2 in the garage, 2 in the driveway.
Well, I would just say that I think the market will sort of dictate that. I mean, we're seeing mixed-use developments come in right now in Crabapple where you've got loft apartments and, all the parking spaces are underground, serviced by an elevator, and they're being built for empty nesters. They're not being built for the young families, just because the
Although
type
right
of...
now, this is some of our more affordable housing.
Yeah. Well, but the single family, which we saw last month, but certainly the mixed-use development in this Crabapple area, we're seeing much more of an empty nester type of development market coming in.
I personally would love to see some more of the details before I am comfortable casting a definitive vote, but I'll let the
Anybody have any?
be cast as they may.
Yeah, no, I agree with that. I would be open to deferring it to make sure that.
I mean, I'm okay with voting for it tonight, but we'll have any other questions for staff? Y'all good? All right, I'll open it up for a motion.
And you'll have to vote for each of them separately, so.
Okay, motion for RZ 17-09.
I move we defer RZ 17-09 to give staff an opportunity to bring us some additional details that they used in the assessment to get to the conclusions they reached for us this evening.
That to our December 13th meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
I second that.
Sorry.
Okay, we have a motion, a second. Any discussion on that motion? Yeah, I'm personally okay with this because I'm all for it in the Crabapple and Deerfield area. Any other discussion? All right, all in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's 3-3.
Did you raise your hand for?
I'm aye. I voted for it.
Okay, so it's
It's 3-3.
It's a failed motion.
Well, I'll open it up for another motion. I know where this is going, so I'll open it for another motion.
I'll make a motion, we approve RZ 17-09 as submitted.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion on the motion? All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay. And Wilson texted me and said, do I need to be at the meeting? And I said, no, we're all good.
It's like, where are you?
Because he's running late.
I just think we have to have faith in what the staff's put together. I mean, they're the professionals.
Exactly.
If they've done it and they've done their research, I believe them, and that's why I'm voting.
Yeah, I think the argument is 3.5 the number, right? Or should it be 4.5? I mean, I think that's where we're.
Or keeping it the same.
Or keeping it the same, which I am absolutely do not agree with that, because I do think as we plan for the future and stuff, I know I don't drive my car and stuff. I mean, I think more people are taking Uber and alternative vehicles, and if you go to downtown Roswell and you go to every other place that is what we consider underparked, their economy is booming. And I would rather have a booming economy than being underparked.
Having
So,
a ton of empty parking
yeah,
spots.
I mean, that's just my opinion. But let's try one more motion. If we don't get it through, then then we know what happens. So open up for,
I just think, let me add
Okay,
that
sure.
comment. And I don't disagree with you about the areas that we see that are booming are those that there's a sense of hustle and bustle because it's got a sense of place. But because we don't know what that looks like yet, because it's still so hypothetical, I think there's as much risk if, using the example I gave earlier, if we become a restaurant area, all of a sudden you've compromised your opportunity for success.
That's not mixed use then. If this whole area is nothing but restaurants, I mean, that's not the whole point of what we want to have developed here.
We don't know.
How the restaurants go in.
We can't say that it is or isn't.
Can't get a license.
we need,
So all I'm saying is I'd just like a few more facts. I think staff's got it. I mean, I trust that they've done their research, but I'd just like to hear it myself as well before I'm prepared to make a final recommendation to go forward. And I also think there's still a difference between Crabapple and Deerfield, and we should contemplate that as a key driver between keeping it separate.
cool. All right, one more motion.
I move we defer RZ 17-09 to our December 13th meeting.
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, now just say it again. I'll just say the motion again. I mean, we don't, I mean, we can't, we're not going to deny this tonight, and we're not going to approve it tonight, and we're tied 3-3, so it automatically is going to end up getting deferred. So we didn't convince anyone on this side, so let's just now open up for a motion. Open it up.
Same motion.
All right, say it for the record, December 13th meeting.
Okay, I move we defer RZ 17-09 to the December 13th meeting.
Okay?
I'll second.
All right, all in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay. Next agenda item.
Well, we still have to do the.
Oh, yeah, let's do RZ-10.
Oh, yeah, okay. I move we defer RZ 17 to the December 13th meeting.
Second.
All right, any discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay.
I move we defer RZ 17.
I think that's different.
To hear that. I'm sorry.
All right, let's go.
Yeah. So much for dinner next time we come here.
I know.
RZ 1711, text amendment to Article 20, Field Form-Based Code, Table 10, specific function and use regarding the T6 transect zone.
Okay, thank you, members of the Planning Commission.
Just telling Wilson he missed out. Hold on.
Yeah, he missed.
We have our Deerfield Form-Based Code, our T6, is our most treasured land in that we have zoned it for very high-intensity use. And as you know, we don't have a lot of economic development available land within the city, and so we really value our T6. When we wrote the Form-Based Code for Deerfield, we allowed residential use in the T6 zone. And based on the marketplace at the moment, there is very little market for office, which is what we all anticipated the use for the T6 would be. And so what we've seen is we've seen a lot of interest by residential developers for either single-family homes or townhouses with no mixed use included, just straight residential. And we really felt that this land was much too valuable to the city to retain that allowed, it's either allowed by right or by use permit, depending on what type of residential use it is. So our proposal is to eliminate all residential uses from the T6 and just the T6, which is along Deerfield Parkway, Webb Road, and Morris Road, adjacent to 400. And that's all very highly visible land, and we certainly hope someday that we may not get Amazon, but we'd like to get something very similar. So for all those reasons, we would propose that the residential use be deleted from the T6 transit zone in the Deerfield Form-Based Code.
All right. Any public comment on this? All right.
We
if
don't.
not- Oh, we got one.
Oh,
here comes one.
I'm sorry. You snuck up behind me. It's Joshua Scoggins.
Good evening, Planning Commission members. Thank you for letting me speak. My name is Joshua Scoggins. I'm an attorney with Miles Hansford and Talent, in Cumming, Georgia. My address is 202 Triple Gap Road, Cumming, Georgia 30040. I represent Crescent Communities, who owns 2 large tracts in the T6 transect area in Deerfield. One is a 21-acre parcel on Deerfield Parkway, and another one actually splits Alpharetta and Milton on Morris Road. And I find the timing of this moratorium and code change convenient, as it, I think, specifically addresses Crescent's property on Deerfield Parkway, where we have not exactly, we haven't filed any particular plans with the city. We've attempted to do that. Those are blocked by the moratorium. I can see the concept of mixed use. I think that's a great land use. I think it's a neat concept. We just don't like the idea of eliminating all conceivable residential use, period, ever. We can agree or disagree about whether it's mixed use, whether it's all, single family, townhomes, that sort of thing, but I think we should leave that open to case-by-case interpretation so that we don't throw the baby out with the bathwater on every conceivable piece of land in that transect. Thank you.
All right. Any other public comment? All right. I will close public comment and open it up. Questions for staff?
I only have, it's not a comment, but on the third line
typo
from the bottom, it says it's staff's opinion that this R, and it should be area.
Yes. Yeah, we actually did catch that. Thank you, though, Fred. Yes.
I didn't want to let you down.
No, thank you so much.
It's the only one in the entire package.
Yeah, right.
They put those in there just to see if you catch
Fred.
I think so too.
That's right.
Only
This is
Fred,
for
though.
Fred.
Any other questions for staff?
So, just to clarify or confirm, basically right now, this is not saying that currently the way it is, it's not that it has to only be residential. Is that correct?
Yes, there are other uses. There's a whole host of other uses allowed in the T6, including the residential, though.
Okay. And so I guess in terms of, maybe developers or people that you guys have interacted with who may be interested in this area, like, has there been any other feedback that you guys have been giving as to why maybe non-residential has not being developed here?
We've just heard that the office market right now, the spec market for offices is not very active, and that's really the only feedback I've had. But we have had some interest from residential developers on some of the sites within the T6, and in terms of what the intent was for T6, it really was not for it to be a residential area, but really to be intensely developed for office or mixed use.
And so the way it is now, it could still be intensely developed that way, correct?
That is correct. We're just,
whether you kept residential or you eliminated residential.
Yes, that's correct. Yes.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, this is one of our prime pieces of real estate that we need to keep for future development for office and intense use. All right, any other questions for staff? All right, open up for a motion.
I move we accept the recommendation on RZ 17-11.
I'll second that.
All right, any discussion on the motion?
I'm just kind of confused as to why we would need to eliminate it.
Because that, and in my opinion, where that is on Deerfield, off of 400, does not need to be 100 townhomes or single-family homes. That should be used for office, commercial, or something in that regard. But that's just my opinion.
So
right.
Where is it right off of?
Yeah, Zara, can we show where the T6 is exactly?
Yeah, we'll figure it out.
Yeah, we got it.
It's just our last opportunity
So if you take out residential, would it still be mixed use and have residential in it?
No, commercial.
So mixed use does not have.
An office on top.
Once it's gone, it's not.
I'm just assuming every T6 property owner received a notice.
We did send, it's not required, this isn't under, well, yeah. It's not required, but we did send notices to the T6 property owners.
Okay.
So anything, this is 400 here. And then this is Morris, this is Alpharetta. This is our old, right here is our old office. So anything in this deep plum purple is T6. So all these properties here. And then these are the townhomes across the street from the old office.
And Verizon, like, point out where Verizon
Verizon is right in this area here.
Okay. Got it.
And then this is one of the crescent pieces of property. And then this is the other along 400.
Got it.
So, but some of that, what color did you call that? Plum? Purple?
The plum, the dark.
So, but some of that is already developed residential?
The only residential within, which was done under Fulton County before we had form-based code, is this in the middle. I don't.
Directly across from the old office?
Right, exactly.
yes,
So that's the
exactly.
only residential that's in the T6.
That's not Deerfield, is that Deerfield Green, I think, that those townhomes like?
No, that's Deerfield Green's up here above Webb Road.
Okay.
So that's a it's a T5 limited, but this is the only residential within the area. And again, it was developed prior to the incorporation and before the form-based code. And I believe even then it was inconsistent with their plan at the time, but the Board of Commissioners approved it, so. And then again, this is Verizon. This is the office building down at the corner. There's the hotel back here. And this is blank. This is another undeveloped piece. This is underdeveloped. I think there's a couple buildings over here. So.
Any other questions for staff?
So, I mean, I know you said that potentially Fulton County may have not intended on it, but again, that was how many ever years ago? You know, why is this coming up now versus so many years back?
Well, it's not zoning back. We're just trying to eliminate, even under Fulton County, all this area, I think there was zonings approved up to like millions of square feet of office. So the intent, we're not really, it doesn't really matter what they did, but what we're really trying to preserve what little property we have for tax space not to be residential. And it's just, that's what everybody is looking at. Not everybody, but quite a few people have looked at residential for this crescent piece as well as this piece back here that borders Alpharetta. This lower part here.
We, in fact, have had presentation.
I'm sorry?
I said we've had presentations before on that.
Right. So, and also the piece in this crescent piece about 4 or 5 years ago came for apartments, and they were purely, we really encouraged them to do some sort of mixed use, and they chose not to, and it was before, well, actually, it was the form-based code, and they needed a use permit.
Right.
And then it was, the council denied it. They litigated against the city, and ultimately the city won the decision, so it wasn't overturned. So, anyway, any more questions?
Any other questions for staff? All right, open up for a motion.
Motion's already been made.
Motion.
Oh, okay. Who made a second? All right. Any other discussion? That's right. Fred made the motion. And who seconded it? Paul seconded it. All right. Any other discussion on that motion? All right. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay. That's 5-1. All right. What else? Is that it?
So that's the end of our items. We'll have one text amendment along with these deferred parking text
Okay.
amendments for the 13th. So
Sounds good. Any other questions for staff?
Move we adjourn.
All right.
I second that.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Oppose? Okay. Thank you.
Oh, hey, one more comment.
We're going to have to do
Oh, never mind.
analysis of the hotels.
You can say your swan.